Imagine a future where freedom has been replaced by comfort, where no one thinks their own thoughts anymore, only reposts them, where rebellion has been pacified by entertainment, where people smile in public but feel hollow in private, where identity is not earned but downloaded, copied, monetized, and then discarded. Now, open your eyes, because you're already living in it. Fyodor Dostoyevsky saw this world long before it arrived. In the mid-1800s, he wrote of a coming age, not of tyrants with whips, but of systems so seductive people would surrender their souls willingly. He saw that the danger wouldn't be external domination, but internal erosion, the slow, quiet death of the individual, not by force, but by consent. Ask yourself this. When was the last time you had a thought that didn't come from a feed? When was the last time you chose something not because it was popular, but because it was true for you? How much of your identity, your politics, your dreams, your style, your beliefs is authentically yours? How much was handed to you by a culture that profits from your predictability? And the deeper question, do you even want to be free, or just comfortable? In Notes from Underground, Dostoyevsky writes of a man buried in resentment, rejected by the world, adrift in his own mind. He is angry, ugly, petty, but he's also terrifyingly honest. He exposes the lie behind every system that claims to fix human nature. He says, "I don't want a life of predictability and peace. I want to make mistakes. I want to break things. I want the freedom to be irrational." Why? Because in a world without that freedom, we are no longer alive. This is Dostoyevsky's paradox. You can have peace, pleasure, and perfect order, but lose your soul in the process. You can live in a society where suffering is eliminated, where risk is minimized, where everything is planned for your safety, and yet you feel nothing. No fire, no longing, no self, just performance. You become a product of algorithms, reacting to stimuli like a well-trained dog. You're happy, but only in the way a machine is when it runs smoothly. No confusion, no rebellion, no depth, just compliance. In The Brothers Karamazov, Dostoyevsky imagines a world where Christ returns, but is arrested. Why? Because humanity has evolved past freedom. We no longer want it. We want security. Bread, predictability. The Inquisitor says, "We have corrected your work. We've taken the terrifying freedom God gave us and replaced it with comfort, because freedom requires courage, and most people don't want to be courageous. They want to be managed." Here is the great contradiction. Everyone says they want freedom, but most people want freedom without the burden of self-responsibility. They want the feeling of individuality, without the cost of thinking for themselves, of suffering for their beliefs, of being misunderstood, of standing alone. And so, inch by inch, they trade authenticity for approval, depth for dopamine, selfhood for simulation, and the system smiles because it doesn't need to kill you. It just needs you to forget that you were ever alive. So here is the great question. Is the self you're living truly yours? Or is it a carefully constructed adaptation to a world that never wanted you whole? Is your mind yours, your desires, your dreams? Or are they downloaded, filtered, monetized, masquerading as choices in a rigged maze? If freedom feels heavy, good. It's supposed to, because being an individual isn't convenient. It's a burden, a sacred one. One Dostoyevsky feared the world would one day refuse to carry. In the next section, we'll explore how this death of the individual begins. 1036 August 8th, 2025. How it's manufactured by systems, culture, and even your own psychological defenses. We'll look into the hidden forces, internal and external, that quietly shape you into a product, and how, without knowing it, you might already be participating in your own erasure. The death of the individual doesn't happen through violence. It happens through suggestion, through subtle cues, quiet rewards, and invisible punishments that teach you what not to say, what not to feel, what not to be. By the time you realize you've been shaped, you've already been sculpted into someone else. It begins in childhood. Before you had words, you had a presence, raw, instinctual, divine. But that presence was too much, too loud, too emotional, too curious, too slow, too alive. So the world gave you two options: belong, by cutting parts of yourself away, remain whole, and be cast out. And because you were small, vulnerable, dependent, you chose belonging. But it wasn't real belonging. It was conditional acceptance, the kind that says, you are only lovable when you abandon who you really are. And thus the split begins. Carl Jung called it the creation of the persona, the mask you wear to survive in society. It's not fake. It's incomplete. It shows only what is acceptable and hides everything that is not. The anger, the wildness, the sensitivity, the inconvenient truth. You push them into the shadow, not because they're evil, but because they threatened your survival. And slowly, your life becomes a negotiation between the self you present and the self you repress. The problem is, when you exile parts of yourself, you become dependent on the world to define you. You no longer know what you want. You know only what is rewarded. You don't ask, what is true for me? You ask, what will make them like me? And in that subtle shift, you disappear. Not all at once, not dramatically. You vanish incrementally. Through every choice you make from fear, through every yes that meant no, through every silence that swallowed your truth. Society doesn't need to kill the individual with force. It just needs to make authenticity inconvenient. It creates systems that reward conformity and punish divergence. Schools that teach you what to think, but never how to think. Careers that value obedience over creativity. Social platforms that measure your worth by engagement. And beneath it all, an invisible algorithm of shame. You become addicted to approval and allergic to discomfort, which means you're no longer choosing your life. You're reacting to what will make you feel safe. Dostoyevsky foresaw this psychic erosion. He knew that the state wouldn't need to control your thoughts if it could train you to avoid the discomfort of thinking. He knew that tyranny could wear the face of compassion and that people would trade their essence for the illusion of peace. Because truth is heavy, and comfort is light, and most people would rather float in falsehood than drown in the weight of self-responsibility. This is why people fear solitude, because in silence, the mask falls. The shadow speaks. The real self stirs beneath the surface. And that self, it is wild. It is not optimized, not filtered, not brand safe. It has desires that don't fit in your 5-year plan. It has rage you've never expressed. It has questions no one wants to hear. And if you listen too long, you might have to change. Søren Kierkegaard once wrote, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." This despair is invisible, socially acceptable, often praised. It looks like success. It smells like stability. It even smiles in photographs. But inside, there is a quiet death. The death of potential, of passion, of personhood. Because you can't fake being alive, not forever. The death of the individual doesn't just harm you, it harms the world. Every time you silence your truth, the collective becomes a little more numb. Every time you betray your instinct, we lose another voice that could have healed, challenged, awakened something in us. You were not born to blend in. You were born to bring contrast, friction, color. And when you mute yourself, the whole tapestry becomes grayer, less human, more mechanical. And this is exactly what Dostoyevsky feared. Not a future ruled by tyrants, but one ruled by total sameness. A world where the sacred is drowned in the shallow pools of mass consensus. But here's the twist. You can't kill the individual completely. You can bury it, drug it, Drown it in dopamine and deadlines. But it never dies. It waits. It waits in your grief, in your dreams, in the art you forgot how to make, in the truths you stopped speaking, in the moments that make your chest ache for no reason. It waits for you to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. In the next section, we'll witness what happens when you ignore that call for too long. We'll explore the unseen consequences of abandoning your individuality, not abstractly, but in your body, your relationships, your sense of reality. We'll see what happens when a person becomes a stranger to themselves. It doesn't look like a crisis at first. It looks like routine. You wake up, you check your phone before you've even felt your breath. You scroll through other people's lives before you've touched your own. You go to work, you say the right things, you play your role, you laugh when expected, you contribute when required. You keep everything functional, but something inside is starving. You can feel it. A low background hum of discontent, a faint sadness with no clear source, a subtle detachment from your own choices, your own voice, your own skin. You start saying things like, "I don't even know what I want anymore. I feel like I'm just going through the motions. I'm tired, but not in my body. In my soul." You think you're burnt out, but it's worse. You're disconnected from yourself, from truth, from the wild, trembling pulse of your aliveness. And because this is so common, you think it's normal.
Everyone seems numb. Everyone seems mildly anxious. Everyone drinks, scrolls, binge watches, overworks, distracts. So you assume this is just adulthood. But Dostoyevsky would call this something else entirely. Spiritual death. Not the dramatic kind. Not the kind with funerals and eulogies. But the slow suffocation of your individuality. Beneath layers of expectation and distraction. The soul isn't destroyed. It's buried. And you begin to mistake the coffin for a home. It starts affecting your relationships. You can't connect deeply. Because you're not there. Not fully. You talk, but you don't feel heard. You listen, but only with half your presence. You perform emotions instead of embodying them. And intimacy becomes exhausting. Because when you're always wearing a mask, closeness feels like a threat. So you stay guarded, polite, distant, and call it mature. But what it really is fear. It infects your creativity. You used to write, or paint, or play, or dream. Now, you don't have time. You lost interest. You're too busy. But it's not time you lost. It's permission. Permission to be messy, to be raw, to make something that doesn't impress, but expresses. Your creativity didn't die. It got locked in a room you stopped visiting. And every day you ignore that knock, your soul gets quieter. It even warps your morality. You start justifying choices you once knew were wrong. Not because you're evil, but because you're empty. And emptiness is easier to numb than to confront. You compromise your integrity for status. You stay in environments that dehumanize you. You trade your values for applause. And soon, you can't tell the difference between success and self-betrayal. Because the map you're using wasn't drawn by your own hand. And what about your body? Your body feels it all. It carries the weight of every unspoken truth, every fake smile, every "I'm fine" you said when you were not. So it starts to speak in symptoms. Fatigue that won't go away. Anxiety that hits you for no reason. Depression that feels more like dissociation than sadness. Your body becomes a battleground between the soul trying to surface and the identity trying to suppress it. But you keep going, because productivity is the last religion we still believe in. And still, the system clapped for you. You're high-functioning. You're reliable. You're doing everything right. But if they could see your dreams, if they could feel your quiet ache at night, if they could witness the part of you that cries silently during Zoom calls, they'd know you are not living. You are performing life. This is Dostoyevsky's ultimate fear made real. A society where everyone is technically free, but psychologically imprisoned, where no one questions the structure, because it's wrapped in luxury, entertainment, and infinite choice, where rebellion feels too inconvenient, where truth sounds too intense, where people live their whole lives without ever touching the edges of their own souls. And yet, Beneath the numbness, something resists, a flicker, a restlessness, a low voice that refuses to be silenced. It comes out in your tears during sad songs, in the ache you feel when someone speaks honestly, in the goosebumps when you remember a moment you felt real. This is not weakness. This is your individuality, trying to wake you up. Because here's the quiet horror. The longer you live as someone you're not, the harder it becomes to remember who you are. The less you question the system, the more it becomes invisible. The longer you betray your voice, the more foreign it feels to speak. And one day, you might wake up surrounded by everything you ever thought you wanted, and realize you can't feel any of it, because the person it was all for is gone. But it's not too late. In the next section, we'll ignite the rebellion. We'll look at how to reverse the erasure, to reclaim your individuality. In a world that profits from your silence, we'll move from despair to defiance, not with slogans or manifestos, but with a return to the most radical act of all, being fully, fiercely, unapologetically you. The machine wants a version of you that is easy to market, easy to manage, easy to replace. But Dostoyevsky didn't write for machines. He wrote for the human spirit, the raw, jagged, defiant force that refuses to be reduced. And that spirit still lives in you. Even now, even under the layers, even if it whispers instead of screams. Rebellion starts when you stop pretending, not to others, to yourself. You say, I'm not fine. I'm not fulfilled. I don't want this life. Not like this. You let the illusion collapse. You let the mask fall, the one that smiles when you're numb, that says, I'm doing great when you're spiritually bankrupt. This is step one, radical honesty. The second step, you get quiet. You unplug, not to escape, but to hear. You stop feeding your brain with endless noise and start listening to the quiet intelligence that's been buried under notifications and algorithms. You walk, you sit, you feel, you let the silence become your teacher. And in that stillness, you begin to remember who you were before the programming. You reclaim your language. You stop parroting opinions. You stop outsourcing your truth to popular narratives. You start speaking from the body, from the gut, from the shadow. It's messy, it's imperfect, but it's real. And suddenly, people start looking at you differently, not because you're louder, but because you're present. You're not mimicking life. You're inhabiting it. You start saying no. No to the meetings that drain your soul. No to the roles that shrink you. No to the people who only love your mask. And it's terrifying at first, because for so long, you equated love with performance. But something shifts. You stop seeking to be liked. You start seeking to be true. And in doing so, you find a new kind of relationship, not built on projection, but on revelation. You show yourself and invite others to do the same. You unlearn productivity as a measure of worth. You stop racing. You start rooting into presence, into purpose, into being, not doing. You realize, I'm not here to win a game I never agreed to play. You make art again. You sing again. You cry in a shower and call it sacred. You stop optimizing for efficiency and start remembering what it means to simply exist. You face your shadow, not to conquer it, but to reclaim it. You meet the rage, the grief, the strange desires, the inconvenient truths. You stop pretending they're mistakes. You start recognizing them as parts of your wholeness. As Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But you can't do that if you're only living in the light. You must walk into the dark and greet the parts you were told to hide, not to be fixed, to be welcomed. You reclaim your body, not as an aesthetic object, but as a vessel of truth. You eat when you're hungry. You rest when you're tired. You dance without filming it. You stop outsourcing your worth to mirrors or metrics. You stop comparing your body to ideals that were never made for humans. You treat your body like a sanctuary, because that's what it is. A sacred place where soul meets skin. A reminder that you are not a product. You are a presence. And slowly, you begin to rebel in ways no algorithm can predict. You stop performing. You start expressing. You stop conforming. You start creating. You stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, what does my soul want to say before I leave this world? This is dangerous, not to you, to the machine, because the awakened individual cannot be manipulated. They cannot be sold things they don't need. They cannot be shamed into silence. They cannot be sedated by distraction. They are free, not just politically, existentially. And here's the most radical part. You realize you don't have to change the whole world. You just have to stop letting the world change you. You walk through the city with your integrity intact. You sit in meetings and speak the truth anyway. You love without performance. You create without permission. And your very existence becomes a signal to others, to the collective unconscious. A signal that says, it's possible. You can remember. You can return. You are not here to be efficient. You are here to be whole. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be real. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be true. This is a rebellion, not of politics, of presence, not of violence, of vision, not of noise, of soul. In the final section, we return to Dostoyevsky's ultimate insight, the warning he gave not just his time, but to ours. We reveal the deepest truth beneath all of this, that the individual is not something you build. It is something you remember, and in that remembering, you change the world without trying to. The individual doesn't die because it's weak. It dies because it forgets it was ever real. Because over time, when you trade too much of yourself for approval, survival, and belonging, you begin to doubt that your truth was ever truth at all. You don't wake up one morning and declare, I am no longer myself. It happens quietly, through choices that feel small, through compromises that feel mature, through silences that feel safe, until one day, you are a ghost in your own life, living someone else's idea of who you should be. Dostoyevsky's characters were never neat. They were irrational, conflicted, contradictory. They were alive. He didn't write to give you heroes. He wrote to remind you that the self is a battlefield, and to pretend otherwise is to lose before you even begin. His final warning wasn't against oppression. It was against the lie of total harmony. He knew when society tells you that everyone is equal, what it really means is everyone should be the same. Same thoughts, same values, same polite silence. But sameness is not unity. Sameness is death. You were not meant to be flat, predictable, consistent. You were meant to contradict yourself, to say things you later outgrow, to feel things you can't explain, to live in tension with your own beliefs. That's not weakness. That's freedom. That's being human. And if you try to flatten that wildness, to become palatable, tidy, and correct, you don't become enlightened. You become erased. The deepest truth is this. The individual is not something you build. It's something you return to, something you remember. After everything false has burned away, it's not in your titles, not in your preferences, not in your labels or your roles. It's in the stillness beneath all of it, the place where no one is watching, where nothing needs to be performed, where you are not a brand, not a summary, not a projection. You are presence. You are contradiction. You are alive. And that is enough. So what now? Now you listen, not to the noise, but to the frequency of your soul. It's subtle, but it's constant. It speaks in longings, in aches, in the quiet no you feel when you're doing what's expected, in the soft yes you hear when you imagine something wild and true. Follow it, not to be exceptional, but to be real. You will lose people. You will be misunderstood. You will walk into rooms where everyone is clapping and feel the chill of your own silence. But you will also find something else. You will find your voice again, your taste, your desires, your soul, and in finding it, you will remember what society worked so hard to make you forget, that you do not exist to serve systems. Systems exist to serve you. If they don't, you're not broken for resisting them. You're awake. Dostoyevsky never gave easy answers, because awakening is not about comfort. It's about courage, the courage to live without a script, to say, I don't know, and mean it, to tell the truth even when your voice shakes, to feel fully, to break quietly, to rise messily, the courage to become yourself again, in a world that rewards masks. And when you do, you will begin to see others differently too, not as projections, not as roles, but as souls, trying to break through their own fog. You'll speak less to impress, and more to connect. You'll stop fighting to be heard, and start listening with your whole being. And suddenly, your very presence becomes medicine, a mirror that reminds others they're still in there too. You don't need to start a revolution. You are the revolution. Every time you tell the truth, Every time you choose presence over performance, every time you protect the sacred within you from the world that wanted packaged and sold, you defy the machine, not with anger, with aliveness. So here we are, not at the end, at the threshold, the place where you stop running from yourself and begin the long walk home, where you bury the performance and resurrect the soul, where you remember with trembling certainty, I am not here to be like anyone else. I am here to be me, flawed, contradictory, unfinished, and holy,